This is a code tour of Animation Buddy. This is a program I made I worked on and off on it for 1 to 2 years, and now it's finished. Finished enough that I don't really have anything to add to it. And I'm ready to move on with my life. So, this is the start page, just to give an overview. You have Animation Buddy. Lets you flip frame by frame and kind of get a feel for motion. I made this because I really like making animation personal projects, and one way to assist that is to occasionally do some of these motion studies from real life video. And yeah, it's a good way to use my skills in programming to help myself, because YouTube, honestly, I started using YouTube for this, flipping frame by frame with the comma and period keys. Very slow. It's not made for frame by frame flipping. And so, this is the start page, but I'll show the real thing. I'll just run the exe. And this is Animation Buddy. I can drag a video, say from my desktop or my file system, and now it's loaded. And now I can jump to a part of the video, and now I can flip by frame by frame. I can use hotkeys as well. You can see I have like page down or scroll down, so I can scroll through this video like this, or I can use my page up and page down keys. Works even when when the window is not focused. Like I'll drag that off to the side, I'll start dragging this around, and I'll scroll from here while that window is not focused. It works. As well as that, say I wanted to like load up a YouTube video, I can just click download YouTube video from clipboard because I copied it. Now it's downloading. Now it's loaded. And I can flip by frame, and that's what this application is made for. As you saw on the start page, it lets you do studies like this. Yeah, very loose, very gestural. Kind of builds your brain in a certain way, lets you intuit motion and apply that to a drawing. Yeah, so this has a real use case and a real motivation, and I'm not the only person who would benefit from this software's existence, though I made it for myself. So I'm going to do a code tour of this. I actually already have Sublime open, so I can do that. So, this is made in C++, but there are older versions. I made a version in Java, for instance. Here is what the Java version looks like. You can see actually the timeline has like variable frame lengths. That turned out to be a bad idea because you lose information when you decide to break it up into frames, and I want the raw frame by frame 24 FPS thing. I don't want to reduce information for my study. Yeah, so this is the Java version. It's not as good. I didn't have as much control over the program when I was making it in Java, nor the UI. It's just not very good. This is the actual application. I made a few versions in C++. One of them used OpenCV for converting the video to PNGs. Terrible idea, very slow. This one uses FFmpeg. I tried using the underlying library beneath FFmpeg, but it did not work as the documentation said it would, and so I found it unreliable. I'm running the demo right now. There we go. I'll just play this while I talk or something. Yeah, so technologies that this uses, it just runs exes. That's one thing it does. It runs YouTube dlp.exe. Lets you update that in the menu as well. It runs ffmpeg.exe. And that is definitely inefficient. Like Windows doesn't need to involve its image loader that runs an exe, and it could just be library code that I call, but they didn't really make it into that, and I don't want to spend my lifetime working with video codecs and stuff. I just want to get this working so I can use it. Yeah, one common theme throughout this project has been, like, I did one thing one way, I made an early decision, and then later I had to decide, okay, this decision, I now understand why this is not the best decision. Is it worth doing a better thing? Or for the sake of getting this project done in a reasonable amount of time, can I live with what I've done? Right, knowing that it's not perfect. Right, sometimes the answer is I need to rewrite it and it feels good. Other times the answer is I need to leave it as it is and work on something else more important. And it feels bad, but you have to do it. Yeah, so code tour. Build system. Let me get to that. Well, maybe not. That's not as important as the actual application code. Yeah, use some libraries. Glad for GL loading. GLM just because that was what I used. That was another one of those instances of, is it worth redoing this? In a new project it would be. In an existing project I don't want to remake the interfaces for things, you know? Everything's just one CPP file, because I don't have a reason to compile separate CPP files, so I just pound include everything. Everything is just one file getting compiled. Global input, whatever. We'll get to the step-by-step of this program. So, int main, this is where the program starts. It sets up the window in the OpenGL context. This would be hundreds of lines of code. If I didn't use GLFW, I would have preferred to not use GLFW, because once I wanted to do things with the message loop, wanting to do Windows-specific things with an interface that tries to work in multiple operating systems, even though I'm only working with one operating system, it's just painful, you know? It's not made for that, you know? And so it causes bugs, and it's a non-ideal interface. Square peg, round hole. Yeah, in fact, I had to literally make my own window and window class for raw input. And yet, because GLFW is pulling events, it literally dispatches events, it seems, to my raw input window. I would have preferred to just have my own message loop. I would not use GLFW in a future project, because I can literally just copy and paste my OpenGL context initialization code from other projects. It's like 300 lines, but it's pretty quick to get going. Alright, so in my project, once it does the window setup, it enters the loop. It's just while app running. Does some input collection. Over time, I eventually had that it does window resizing, and that's how doing my own window resizing in custom border lets me not need to separate the Windows event thread from my rendering thread. And that lets me resize a window and not have it freeze. If you ever play a video game, with a resizable window, like I think Minecraft does this, anything on SDL does this. If you resize the window, it will pause. It will stop rendering the game. And in fact, people playing New World, if you know that MMO, they would drag the window, and that would pause the game and let them float in the air. And that was crazy that an MMO would let you do that. It would use client-side computation. Anyway, my application doesn't do that because it just doesn't use the window. It doesn't use Windows for resizing. In fact, I can actually do that. I can show you that. Look, now it has a... Oh, does it not have that window style? I guess not. Huh, alright. So anyway. Yeah, I have my own resizing code here. It says input collection, resizing, this happens every frame. And then this, update and render app frame. You see, I don't actually like breaking programs into functions like this. Look, this is a function that is only called once. I can only find 2 instances of it. There's no reason to break it up. You know, some people love to idealize the same with endapp here. Some people love to idealize their program as like int main, setup, well, should loop, collect input, update, render, swap buffers. Some people love end. Some people love to idealize their programs in this, and then they actually try to write their program with these functions, and they're like, okay, let me make a void setup. Let me make void collect input. Void update render. You know, they try to actually like make these round holes and then try to fill them. And what I mean by round hole is specifically this concept of like you're setting up like holes for like little blocks to fit into, but then later it turns out that the block that you have is like a square peg and you're trying to fit into a round hole and it just doesn't fit. Anyway, it's just weird to make a boundary on that because it makes it harder to do textual changes to your program, and yeah. There's no real point if you can just scroll past it, you know? Like, if you can just put all the code, like hundreds of lines here, hundreds of lines here, and it all just becomes one function. For one, it's very easy to scroll through and see things happen line by line, and you can still separate them with comments. Now we are doing update code. There's no reason to break it up into a function if that function is only called in one place. And sometimes if a function is called in multiple places, you can find a way to make it only called once, but like there's no reason to make that a point of contention no reason to consider what I'm saying there. But you can just make your program just like one int main. I don't know. This is from the perspective of programming solo projects. So maybe it's different with large projects with multiple teams, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just as complicated, but people are just used to what they know. What I try to consider is to get used, like try to make what I know and what I'm used to into the best thing. You know, if what I'm used to is not the best thing, then I want to relearn and readapt my brain until it is. Right? Some people say it works for me, you know, that's why I do it. And that's a bit of a cop-out, and I try to change what works for me into what's actually good. Anyway. So yeah, update and render app frame. This is called... I contradict myself. This is called every frame. This used to actually be worth having in a different function, because this was literally like on a different thread, you know? And then I factored this, it was just like a movement from making this program multi-threaded into something that is single-threaded that just happened to make this function exist. And I can literally just copy-paste the code if I want to into one function. Yeah, sometimes it helps for browsing through your code to have it like that, but I only do that when it does. It doesn't always. And in fact, in this project, with the scene update, it does, and I'll show that in a second. This is a redundancy. Well, GLFW should close, or if should close. I already do that here. So, yeah, that's just a bit of redundancy I just caught now. I can literally just say if app.running. And probably that should move. This should move, and yeah, whatever. Things are probably where they are just because of when it was multi-threaded. It worked like this. Yeah, probably because I wanted this thread to do the writes to app.running and the other thread to do reads. Or like anything can read it, but this one had to write to it because I wanted control of it from here. Not relevant anymore. Apps build craft over time. And we can fix it, but we'll take forever fixing it. We'll never get a program. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, render is very simple. It is OpenGL, but it's literally just so I can make like a draw rectangle function. You know, like that's my whole OpenGL backend is just so I can have draw rectangle everywhere in the code. So I can use that to design the program. A few like hotkeys and stuff, change menus. Working with the cache. Or no, this is not with the cache, this is with loading the video. And then, very simple, like, if the app is in the plain scene where it's like playing the video, then I actually do have this broken into a function. The reason I do is because I just want to be able to type that in and jump to that part of the code immediately. That I found actually useful. Because I'm actually like I built a round hole and there was a round peg, I didn't, I actually wanted a tangible benefit from that, Even though I was willing to scroll through code in order to find it, I still found a benefit. So I find that concept interesting. Yeah, real programs kind of don't work the way idealized programs work. Like, we don't tend to want, app.hotkey configuring equals -1 here. Like, maybe somebody designing their program on a whiteboard would say, okay, so I want this state, and I want it to have a function like end scene, And I guess this is like Java pseudocode. I want an end scene, and then I want to say okay, then app.hotkey configuring is -1, Or this probably wouldn't even be, you'd probably, maybe in your idealized whiteboard, you are being passed the application. And because it's Java, it's passed by reference automatically. And then you'd say hotkey configuring is -1, and that's technically what I want here when I put every single frame. I say hotkey configuring is -1, and then update the state, and then don't do that if it's hotkey. You could technically idealize it like this. But in a real program that just needs to run, you can make it all nice on that whiteboard. You can design all of those round holes and then hope that you would get round pegs, not square pegs. But it's not actually a point of contention to do this. At least, it kind of is, but it's we're here to make a program, not an ideal. I don't know how to describe this. Well, with this example, it's you think you know how it should work, and then when it actually works this way, when that becomes the lowest friction, local, when that actually becomes the lowest friction way to do things, and it works, it's how much did it really matter for you to have your interface that works this way? Answer is, well, for one, this specific example was probably terrible, but the answer is it probably didn't matter that much. But there is probably cost and benefit. Programs are very complicated, Yeah, so in this program, when it's playing the video in the plain scene, I just get what should be cached, what should be saved to the file system. Then I have my own internal representation of that says okay, do any of these need to be loaded? And then I try to load a long run of them, because there is a cost to starting up and stopping FFmpeg, because it's not ideal the way I did it. And then it sends it to a thread that runs FFmpeg. Yeah, and then later in the code it decides it wants to just draw the frame. It just says, oh wait, no, this is GLTeX image 2D. This is doing an upload. Right, because I just have one global texture, and that is the current frame that is being drawn. Yeah. That's not very important to get into. One cool thing about this program is I have if is hotkey pressed, and I just say which hotkey it is, toggle timeline. And that literally just corresponds to the hotkey structure. It just corresponds to one of these hotkeys. It is a nice interface that lets me design the program quickly. So if toggle timeline, it's this one. if toggle timeline, then app show timeline is not app show timeline, or not app.show timeline. You know, one cool thing I've noticed in programming is when you don't have getter setters, like if you can make your program kind of just figure out there was a change, sometimes that's nice. You know? Like if you were in some horrible apocalyptic land where you had a getter and setter for show timeline, like I'm gonna make this really bad. If you have this horrible getter setter situation, let's say there's just a setter. That's all I want to demonstrate. And then it's like if should show. Let's say you're using some object-oriented GUI library, and all of a sudden you need to say like, okay, get timeline. So if it shouldn't show, and like you have like get timeline dot destroy, which is like getting a UI element, and they have their interface where you need to destroy things. And then otherwise, if it should show, then you like make element and like, I don't know, you have like some layout object, you know, and then you have to like add the element like that, and then you have to say set timeline. You can make these into different variables. Like this is like a crazy situation that has a getter and setter and works with like object-oriented library that wants you to do crazy stuff. Anyway, it's not object-oriented, but it is. I just synonymously put in my head that object-oriented is square peg round hole, but that's not necessarily true. But the way some people use it is, and whenever it's in a library, it often is. But here I just have a boolean. Like, I have this application structure. This is just how the application stores what it needs in order to run. Show timeline, that's a boolean. And so whenever it has, say if mouse inside timeline, this is something I found to be useful, so I made it into a function. I just say if app.showTimeline, then result can be true, otherwise it'll be false. And there's like a rendering stage for show timeline, right? Is there not? Maybe it's in a different file. There we go. Wow, it is just one place that this needs to be, and then that makes it work for the whole program. Yeah, I literally just designed my UI with pound defines that get evaluated, as you call them. It just says like, if show timeline, then the timeline size is some amount, otherwise it's 0. Yeah, it's pretty simple. And so when it draws the timeline, it just uses that height. It can use 0 pixels for the height. Anyway, let's get on to... I showed how the program works, and there's also a render. I'll just show the interface, I guess. GLinit, GLclear. It doesn't need to be factored into functions. It used to be. I don't know, this is an old code base. It's a few years old. It's not old for some people, but for me that's... I've changed the way I do things. I can literally just call functions like GL colored square, and it will draw a colored square there. Uses GLM, non-ideal interface, wasn't worth changing, but in a new project I would not use the GLM library. I don't really like it. Yeah, I can just call a button function, and it'll work. And I had fun. I had fun in this program. Kind of... Let me show the update hotkey setting state. I had fun doing this like push element list. I had seen these around with like various immediate GUIs that people show they made. And so I had fun making an interface like Where did I call a button function? Probably main menu state has like a good clean cut example I can show. Alright. Bool enter hotkey state clicked is equal to button list push button wide. Change hotkeys. I can choose to align the text on its center. And so change hotkeys, that's the button. Yeah, I just had fun making a little interface to design in. Yeah, so anyway, this program, very simple. There was a whole process to making it that I can't really show simply. All I'm showing is the end result, and so there's no good judgment about that. Yeah, it spawns a few threads. It has a thread that loads from it has like multiple threads that load from the file system. It has one thread that runs FFmpeg to load frames, like to render sections of the video. And yeah, build system, I'll get onto that very quickly. It's a batch file. I would do it differently if I were to do a new project, but this worked. I can change the compiler to MSVC or Clang. I can choose to make a demo, or I can choose to not. I can make a debug build, or I can make a release build. If it's a release build, if debug is 0, then then it zips it into a file, and yeah, and then I have this other build script that will automatically build the demo and paid versions of the program, just by calling the build.bat with different arguments. Yeah, I saw TSOding has like a C build system, and that's probably more ideal for what a build system should actually be. CMake is horrible. It doesn't make things easier. Like you had one job, and that's to make a domain-specific language that simplifies all of this, and you made it more complicated to do things because it's a domain-specific language, and you always lose capability when you abstract. And so, like, you can't do things, you know, and it's... Well, you can do things. I used CMake, and it just turns out when you do things, it is a square peg round hole situation. It doesn't work as it should. Anyway. Yeah, when I build, it literally just copies the README into the out folder. It just makes literally... And when it's the demo, it copies the demo video into the folder as well. And then when I build whenever I build a release build, it also zips it up and puts into the releases folder. Makes it very quick to release an update if I want to. And yeah, that's the program, that's the build system, that's the code, that's the project history. And yeah, if you have any questions, I could answer them. One last thing I want to say is, regarding projects and making things, it's not hard to make things. That's not what makes making things hard. It's not hard to, like, do the programming that makes the thing, is what I mean. The hard thing, I find, for me, personally, is setting myself up mentally such that I can keep working on this for a long time and do the difficult things that makes it good. It's this mental game. It's this setup. Like, it's not... I really don't know if it's a case of making it fun to do the hard things, or if it's a case of discipline to do the hard things. But that's the hard thing, is making yourself do hard things. It's not hard to do hard things, like from a logical perspective and from a problem-solving perspective. Can always make things better, can always be adaptable, can always rewrite it if it's not good. That's not hard. You know, the actual process is easy. But making myself do the things that I know I should do, that is something I'm trying to solve. Um, happy this project is done. I could make it better, but I just want to move on. Yeah, so it's time for a break for me personally. It's, if I were stronger and more resilient, I would have already set myself up. Well, I'm connecting concepts differently. Let me say, if I had set myself up better to be even better of a programmer, I would have set myself up such that even when I don't want to work, I do work. And that the amount that I don't want to work is not too bad. You know, it's two things. It's making it so I want to work, and it's also making it so I work even when I don't want to work. That's honestly my advice to you, is you should work out why you're doing this so that you can endure hard times, you know? Like, there's this stereotype of an artist who feels strong emotions and stress and puts that into their work. Right? That's a simple way for them to continue being an artist even when they're stressed. And for programming, I don't know of an example for that, but yeah, work on that. Even if you still are struggling with the how do I make things run, you know, like you're still learning the basics. Keep that in mind. Keep that mental game in mind. Keep that setup in mind, because that's, I think, very important. Or it will become very important, because you might just learn how to program and then not want to do it. Yeah, so I'm gonna be taking a bit of a break. I worked hard for a few years straight, hours every day, doing many things, kind of foregoing video games. Yeah, and I'm excited for whenever I come back, because I have the skills. As long as I am willing to use them, I can make a lot of cool things. Alright. Yeah, so that's this project tour. That's Animation Buddy. And Firefox update. Yeah, that's that. Cool stuff.